Om Shri Ramaya Namaha Ganesaya Namaha Govindaya Namaha Hari Om.
Thank you, Rajesh. A very, very warm welcome to all the devotees for the first satsang of 2022. It's a pleasure to have Mr. Michael James with us. And thanks to one of our devotees, Sushil ji and Michael, we are starting a new format of the Sunday satsang. Let me try and paint a picture for you. So from this Sunday onwards, Mr. Michael James will be talking to us about Upadesa Saram, and he will be going through all the 30 verses. A brief background, even though most of us would know of it. Muruganar, the poet devotee, was writing in Tamil the story of the wayward rishis of the Daruka forest, who were practicing special rites for attaining powers that they so much desired. Their egos were deflated by Shiva, and perceiving the error of their approach, they humbly sought spiritual instruction from Shiva. Shiva graciously bestowed the instruction, and it is these teachings that Muruganar requested Bhagwan to reveal in verse form. Hence, Maharshi composed these 30 verses in Tamil. Later, Bhagwan translated them into Sanskrit. The Tamil version is titled Upadesh Undiyar, and the Sanskrit version is entitled Upadesh Saram, and it is also referred to as Upadesh Saram. Mr. Michael James is, of course, very well known to all of us. I don't think I should be requiring to introduce him, but just a very quick background. He had started his spiritual journey at Tiruvannamalai during his visit to India in 1976, which is more than 45 years ago. He stayed there for over 20 years and had a long friendship and association with Sri Sadhu Om, and assisted him in translating Guru Vachaka Kovai, Nanyar, Ulladu, Narpadu, and other works of Bhagavan into English. He is now based in London, where he regularly discusses Bhagavan's teachings with fellow devotees via email and Zoom, and also writes articles for his blogs. He addresses devotees of Ramana Kendra, Delhi, every second Sunday of the month. Mr. Michael James, I would now request you to please take over and guide us.
Namaskaram. I'll start by saying a little bit more about the background of Upadesa Undiyar. That is, Murugan composed a great work called Ramana Sannidhi Murai. It is a collection of hundreds of more, I can't remember how many, many hundreds of verses in praise of Bhagavan. Though it is very original in content, in the literary style, Murugan modeled it on another great work of Tamil called Tiruvasakam by Manikavasaka. So many of the songs that are in Tiruvasakam, in the same style, Murugan composed songs on Bhagavan. Because in Murugan's view, the same Lord Shiva who appeared under a tree in Tiruparandurai to Manikavasaka, the same Lord Shiva, Lord Arunachala Shiva, appeared for our benefit in the form of Bhagavan Ramana. So Murugan saw no difference between Shiva and Bhagavan Ramana. In fact, Murugan saw all gods as nothing but Bhagavan Ramana. I'll explain a bit more. So one of the songs in Tiruvasakam is called Tiruvundiyar. it's a particular style of song. Every verse ends, the second and third line of each verse ends with the word undipara, which basically means jump and fly. Was probably either a song, a style of song for a particular type of country, rural dance, or maybe a children's game. It's not now known the origin of this. But anyway, this was the style of a verse that Manikavasika composed one song. And in that song, he told various leelas of Lord Shiva. So, as I say, in Murugan's view, Bhagavan is Lord Shiva himself. But all the different names and forms of God, Murugana considered to be manifestations of Bhagavan, that it was Bhagavan who appeared in the form of so many gods. So Murugan actually wrote two Tiruvundiyas. The main one, the largest one, Tiruvundiya 1, he told Leelas of Vinayaka, Subramanya, and various avatars of Vishnu, including Rama and Krishna. And so it was Bhagavan in the form of Krishna who taught the Bhagavad Gita, for example, he says. And then he told various Shiva Leelas, saying it was Bhagavan in the form of Shiva who did all these. There's also a much shorter Tiruvundiya 2, in which he briefly tells the story of Jesus dying on the cross and of Buddha teaching the Buddha Dharma. And he says it was Bhagavan in the form of Jesus who died on the cross to cleanse the world of its sins. And it was Bhagavan in the form of Buddha who taught the Buddha Dharma. So in Murugana's view, everything is Bhagavan. So among the Leelas of Shiva that he told, the last of several Leelas of Shiva that he told, he narrated in this song, in the first Tiruvundiya, that is, he concluded with the story of the Dharakavana Rishis. The Dharakavana Rishis, though they were called Rishis, they were actually, they were not great sages. They were very much attached to karmas. And they were performing karmas in the Dharakavana, that's Dharaka forest, in order to gain the fulfillment of their desires. They wanted power, they wanted to go to heaven after the death of the body and everything. They had so many worldly desires. And for the fulfillment of their worldly desires, they believed their karmas could give them whatever they wanted. And they were very proficient in doing their karmas as prescribed in the Vedas. So Murugana told this story, and then when it came to the point where Lord Shiva, to remove the delusion of these rishis and their attachment to karma, Lord Shiva appeared before them in the form of a mendicant, and he was Vishnu accompanied him in the form of Mohini, and the rishis, seeing the beauty of Mohini, they forgot about their karmas and they started following Mohini. And Lord Shiva appeared as a young man, as a naked mendicant walking through the forest. And the wives of the rishis, they were actually much better than the rishis, because they were very faithfully serving their husbands. So they had more humility than their husbands. So when they saw this divine figure of Lord Shiva in the form of a mendicant, they were attracted by his divine luster, and so they started following him. When the rishis came to know that their wives were following this naked mendicant, they became very angry, forgetting their own mistake, but they were deluded by the beauty of this Mohini. They thought their wives were deluded by the physical beauty of Shiva, but actually they were they were attracted by his divine beauty, not his physical beauty. But anyway, they were very angry. So they wanted to punish this mendicant. So they started various yagas and yajnas and released various weapons upon him. But whatever weapons were released, because that mendicant was Lord Shiva himself, the karmas are powerless before him. So whatever weapons were released, he took the serpent and wore it round his neck as a garland. He took the tiger and wore its skin as a garment. The elephant that was sent on him, he took its skin also. And like that, all the different weapons that were released from this yaga, he easily subdued them. Then only the rishis understood, but there's a power greater, higher than their karmas. So it's at that point that they become humble and they fall at his feet and pray for him to give them spiritual teachings. Murugan deliberately brought the story to this point because he thought this is a very good opportunity to ask Bhagavan to express the teachings that Lord Shiva gave to those rishis. And since the rishis were deluded by karma, he knew it would be an appropriate place for Bhagavan to repudiate the philosophy of the Purva Mimamsa and to assert the philosophy of Vedanta, as I will explain in more detail. So, Bhagavan composed 30 verses, which are Upadesa Undiyar. For recitation, Bhagavan also before Upadesa Undiyar began, the story of Vidarkavana rishis, it goes from verse 70 onwards. So from verse 70 to 102 is the story. Then Upadesa Undiyar, and then some 5 concluding verses. So Bhagavan took from the story, Bhagavan took the first 2 and the last 4 verses as an upagatam, as introductory verses, and Murugan composed a Payaram. Payaram means a prefatory verse. What Murugan sang in his Payaram is Karma Mail Tienda Gatikana Neri Muriin, Man Mail Huiha Varunga Enna Sonmuruga, Ende Ramanan, Tohutu Tindu Upadesa Undiyar Jnana Vilakor. What that means is this Upadesa Undiyar is a light of jnana that our father Ramana composed and gave to Murugana, who said, for the world to be saved, giving up the delusion of karma, tell the secret of the nature of the path to experience liberation. So this is important because that is the main, that is the starting point, the point from which Upadesa Undiyar starts is firstly to remove the delusion of karma, because by karma is finite. Karma means action. All actions are finite. So whatever be the fruit of actions, they are also finite. So by no amount of karma can we attain liberation, because liberation is infinite. Liberation is our real nature. So liberation cannot be attained by karma. So long as we are attached to karma, that is a great delusion. So it's first necessary for Bhagavan to remove this delusion of karma. So that's why Murugana begins this verse, karma mayal tiendu, removing the delusion of karma, gatikana nerimuriyan, the nature of the path to attain, or gatikana literally means to see liberation, or that means to attain liberation, the secret of the means to attain liberation so that the world may be saved. This is what Murugana prayed to Bhagavan for. So this is the context. It's important to bear this in mind, that the context is to remove the delusion of karma and to show the way to liberation. That means the way to liberation is not karma. So since we cannot attain liberation by doing anything, how to attain liberation? It is only by being. And how to be? This is what Bhagavan teaches us in Upadesa Undiyar. So this is the context. And the Upadesa, the first two verses in particular are important because it's setting the scene. That is, in the first verse of Upadesa, Darukavanatil Tabam say Tirandava Purva Karmatal Undipara Pokare Poina Undipara. What that means is those who were doing tapas, austerities, in the Dharaka forest were going to ruin by Purva Karma. Purva Karma means, Purva there refers to Purva Mimamsa. Purva Mimamsa is a system of philosophy, but interprets the meaning of the Vedas, and it gives importance to karma. And according to Purva Mimamsa, karmas are supreme. There is nothing, no power higher than karma. So they don't even have regard for God. If you do the karma has to give its fruit. So the karma is supreme. So in the next verse, Murugana expresses the attitude of these rishis who, and this is the one of the basic ideas of the Purva Mimamsa philosophy. Karma te andri kadaval ile ennum. Van mata ayena undipara banja serikina undipara. What that means is karma te andri kadaval ile. That is, their belief was there is no God except karma. So the meaning of the whole verse is, because of the delusive conceit, they became intoxicated with intense pride that there is no God except karma. That is, if we give importance to karma, if we think karma is supreme, karma is action. It requires a doer. Who is the doer of action? It is ego. So we are elevating ego. We are boosting ego. If we believe in the power of karma, we are boosting ego, particularly if we believe that there's no power higher than karma. So they were so egotistical. They thought our karmas are the highest power there is. There's not even a God who can overrule the power of our karma. So if we do karma, it will definitely bear fruit. Such was their arrogant attitude. And then the story goes on. I won't go, I've given a brief outline of the story, but Lord Shiva comes to remove that pride. This is the context of Upadesa India. Why I say all this is it's important to understand this, because this sets a context for particularly for the early verses of Upadesa India, which Bhagavan also translated into Sanskrit as Upadesa Saram. So I must confess, I am not an expert in Sanskrit, but I'm, with the help of dictionaries and so on, I'm able to understand. Because I understand the meaning of the Tamil original, it is relatively easy for me to understand the meaning of these verses of Upadesa Saram, which Bhagavan, about the Sanskrit version. I think actually when Bhagavan first composed Upadesa India in Tamil, then I think some Telugu devotees asked him to compose in Telugu. So I think the first translated version was Telugu. The second, then Bhagavan translated into Sanskrit, and finally he wrote in Malayalam. The Malayalam version is interesting because Bhagavan wrote in a longer meter. So here and there in the Malayalam version, Bhagavan added words which cast more light on the verses. So occasionally I may refer to the Malayalam version for that reason, but the most complete version is the Tamil version. Because Bhagavan wrote the Sanskrit version in a somewhat shorter meter, there are certain important ideas in Tamil that are not explicit in Sanskrit. So I will often refer to the Tamil version to clarify what is meant by what Bhagavan meant in the Sanskrit version. But it's the Sanskrit version that I'm going to be talking about from now onwards. So in the first verse, Bhagavan says, Kartarajnya prapyate palam karma kim param karma tachadam. The meaning of that is that if we split it, first we have to do the padachetam. Kartuha agnya prapyate palam. That means, palam means fruit. That is referring to a fruit of action. Prapyate means it is obtained. So fruit is obtained, agnya, by the order, kartaha, of the doer. But karta literally means the doer. God is often referred to as the doer. Not that God actually does anything. As Bhagavan clarified in the 15th paragraph of Nana, God is not actually a doer. God, by the mere power of the special nature of the presence of God, everything that is to be done, it happens automatically. So God does everything without doing anything. As Bhagavan would often express things, Bhagavan was very fond of saying, seeing without seeing, speaking without speaking, doing without doing. That meant by his mere being, everything happens as it's meant to happen. So when though God is referred to as the doer, we shouldn't take it, but he's literally doing anything, but everything is happening as it should happen by the mere power of his presence. So in that sense, he is the doer, not that he actually ever does anything. The nature of God is pure being, not doing anything. So it is, why this first line is so important, those Dharikavana rishis believe that karma is supreme, but there's no power higher than karma. If you do a certain karma, it will have a certain fruit. It is bound to have its fruit. So if you do the karma, you're bound to experience the fruit of that karma. That was their belief. That is the Purva Mimamsa philosophy. One problem for Purva Mimamsa philosophy was how to explain, if you do a certain action, supposing you do a yaga here in this world, how to explain that gives you happiness in heaven after this, in the next world. What is the logical or causal connection between the karmas that you do here and the fruit that you experience in a later life there in heaven? So to explain that, because Purva Mimamsa didn't want to admit that God ordains the fruit, that God gives the fruit of karma, they used the word adrishta. Adrishta means unseen. They said there's some unseen power that connects the cause with the effect. The cause is the karma, the effect is the fruit of the karma. So there's an unseen connection. So that the term they used was adrishta. Adrishta means what is not, what cannot be seen. You cannot see it, but there is a connection with their belief. I think this term, I don't know about other Indian languages, but certainly in Tamil, this term, the Sanskrit term adrishta becomes adishtam in Tamil. In Tamil, adishtam means luck. So, and I think I believe it's the case in many other Indian languages, but it's used in the same way. But if some good fortune comes to you, that is that is adrishta. That's the origin of that, of the way the term is used now in modern Indian languages. It's from that Purva Mimamsa philosophy. But what is that adrishta? They couldn't say. It's something unseen, but there's an unseen connection between the fruit and between the action and its fruit. Vedanta repudiates this idea. According to Vedanta, karma has no power of its own to give fruit. It gives fruit only as ordained, as allotted by God. So whatever fruit we experience, that is the fruit selected by God as the appropriate fruit for us to experience at the appropriate time. So the law of karma, according to according to Vedanta, there are three karmas: agamya, sanchita, and prarabdha. Actually, of these three, only agamya is a karma. Strictly speaking, only agamya is an action. The sanchita and the prarabdha are karma phala. They're the fruit of action. They're the consequences of action, the moral consequences. So if you do a bad action, the moral consequences of that bad action you'll have to suffer as a consequence. If you do a good action, you get some pleasant experience. But since the actions are finite, the fruit are also finite. So if you live a very, very bad life, you may, in the next life, be in hell. But hell is not, unlike the Judeo-Christian, that is the Abrahamic religions. They believe heaven or hell are eternal. If you live a bad life, you go to hell and you're eternal damnation. If you live a good life, you go to heaven and you're eternally with God in heaven. That is their idea. That is not a very sophisticated idea, because whatever good we do is finite. Whatever bad we do is finite. So according to the dharmic conception, that is all the dharmic religions, what are nowadays classified as Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, their view of heaven and hell are quite different. If you do bad actions, you may go to hell for some time. But in hell, you experience the fruit of your action. Once the fruit is experienced, that's over. You then have to come back to this lifetime to have to this human life to live another life. So heaven and hell, according to Vedanta, and in fact, according to all of the dharmic religions, they are just temporary states. But I'm coming back to Vedanta. The Vedantic view is that there are three types of karma. The first type of karma is the agamya. Agamya means the actions we do in accordance with our own will. But whatever actions we willfully do, those actions have fruit. And the fruit of those actions gets stored in sanchita. Sanchita means a heap or pile. So because in each lifetime, we experience one lifetime worth of fruit. But because we have, generally speaking, our desires are far greater than anything that we can experience. In most cases, in each life, we accumulate far more fruit than we are able to experience. So sanchita is a huge pile. There's so many fruit of past actions, but we haven't yet experienced. So from that huge pile, that sanchita, God selects those fruit which will be most appropriate for us to experience in this lifetime. That is, whatever fruit that will be most conducive to our spiritual development, those are the fruit that God allots for prarabdha for each lifetime. So the prarabdha is a selection of the fruit of our past actions that have been allotted to us by God for us to experience in this lifetime. This is why God is called the doer, in this sense, but he allots for fruit of actions. But he doesn't actually allot the fruit of actions by doing anything, because God is our own real nature. God is, and what we actually are is infinite love. So just by being what he actually is, in other words, being the infinite ocean of love, the infinite ocean of grace, by his mere being, everything happens as it should happen. So the fruit of actions are, by the mere special nature of the presence of God, the fruit of actions are allotted, appropriate fruit. What is the most appropriate fruit? This is why Bhagavan often used to say, whether you call it prarabdha or God's will, it's the same thing. Because though the prarabdha is the fruit of actions that we've done in the past, it's fruit that have been selected by God as being the most favorable fruit for us to experience in this lifetime. This is why sometimes we see very good people, even great saints, they have to suffer a lot in this life. people who have a naive understanding of the law of karma, they think, oh, a person suffers a lot, they must be a very bad person. Because they've done so many bad actions, therefore they're experiencing a miserable life. Whereas those people who have a very favorable life, who have wealth, health, power, social status, all these things, these must be very good people. Not necessarily the case. You may be a very bad person, but seemingly have a very, from a materialistic point of view, you may seem to have a very favorable prarabdha. You may have lots of wealth, lots of political power, lots of social status, all these things may come. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're a good person, you've done lots of good karma. You may have done only a few good karmas. God has selected the fruit of your few good karmas for you to experience in this lifetime for your spiritual betterment. Because when we experience all these material things, if we experience wealth, health, social power, political power, and all these things, we will not be satisfied with them, because nothing can satisfy us, because what we actually are is infinite happiness. Infinite happiness is our real nature. So nothing short of infinite happiness can satisfy us. So however favorable our life is from a worldly point of view, it will not satisfy us. So sometimes it's necessary for us to experience all favorable things in order to understand, but we cannot obtain happiness from these things. We don't know why God gives which fruit to which person. So we need not be concerned about that, because whatever fruit God gives us to experience in this lifetime is what is most favorable for us. So whatever fruit of action, whatever fruit we experience, that is, whatever we experience in this life is the fruit of our past action, selected by God and allotted for us to experience in this lifetime. Since it's selected by him, it is his will, and it is what is most beneficial for us. So whatever be our prarabdha, whether it's favorable or from a worldly perspective, favorable or unfavorable, we should not be concerned. Whether our life is full of suffering or full of pleasures, we shouldn't be concerned. It's all his will. Whatever be, as Bhagavan sings in verse 2 of Arunachal Patikam, Ninishtam enishtam, your will is my will. Imbedaku, that is happiness for me. So we shouldn't desire anything other than his will, because he knows what is better, what is good for us, more than we know. So,
Leave it outside. And the thermometer is on that table.
I'll wash it.
sorry, could you mute your microphone?
Yeah, I will just control. I think Bharati's mic has gone online.
Yeah. I think if you hover your cursor over it, you should be able to see a mute button and you can mute it.
Yes, I'm doing that. Just one moment, please.
Okay.
I
Thank
think
you.
they're all mute now. Yeah,
Yes.
they're all mute.
Okay. Yeah. So, as I was saying, whatever we experience in this lifetime has been selected by Bhagavan for us to experience, so we should accept it as his will. Oh yes, I was saying what Bhagavan says in verse 2 of Arunachal Patikam is Ninishtam enishtam, your will is my will. Imbadaku, that is happiness for me. So we should joyfully accept whatever befalls us in this life is given to us by him for our good. So we should accept it joyfully. This is only if we are willing to accept whatever happens as his will, are we ready to begin to follow the path of surrender. That is, the path of surrender begins with accepting his will, joyfully accepting his will. So since whatever happens in our life is his will, we should, whatever be our prarabdha, whatever be the fruit allotted to us to experience in this lifetime, we should joyfully accept it. So this, what Bhagavan teaches us in this first line, Kartaragnya prapyate palam, is a very, very important teaching. The fruit of karma that the karma cannot bear fruit except by the the ordinance of the order of God. So it is God, whatever fruit we experience, these are the fruit that have been selected by God and allotted for us to experience in this lifetime. So we need, when we do an action, the fruit, it's out of our hands. If you shoot an arrow, before you shoot the arrow, you can aim it at the target. But once you've released the arrow, it's no longer in your hand. If you didn't point it correctly at the target, if you pointed it somewhere else, it's going to go somewhere else. So just like an arrow shot from a bow is no longer under the control of the archer, when we do any action, the fruit is no longer in our hands, it is in God's hands. So whatever fruit we experience, it's entirely up to him. He knows what is the appropriate fruit for the appropriate karma. So these Dharmakavana rishis and the Purva Mimamsa philosophy, they are very, very naive. They believe if you do a certain action, if you do this this Vedic ritual, this yaga or yajna, if you do it in the prescribed manner, it will have to give a certain specified fruit. That is not the case. It's entirely, the fruit of action is entirely in God's hands. Once we've done the action, it's out of our hands. So we need not be concerned about the fruit of action. Why? Because it's safely in God's hands. Whatever fruit he gives us is what is beneficial for us. Then in the second line, there are two sentences, a question and an answer. The question is, karma kim param. Kim is here just functions as an interrogative particle. So karma param would mean karma is supreme. Karma kim param, it makes it a question. Is karma supreme? Param here refers to God. So in Tamil, Bhagavan says, karmam kadavalo, is karma God? Param here stands for God. In other words, is it the supreme power? The supreme power is God. Karma tat jadam. Karma is jada. Jada means it is not aware, it's not sentient. Karma has no power of its own. But it has no power to give its own fruit. It gives fruit only according to the order of God. So this verse is a repudiation of the philosophy of Purva Mimamsa, as embodied by the Dharmakavana rishis in this story. So this is why the story is very important to understand this. This verse can be understood fully only when we understand it in the context of the story. So what Bhagavan is telling us here is that the fruit of action is entirely in God's hands. Karma has no power of its own. Karma is not God. Karma yields fruit according to the will of God and the will of God alone. So this is the first verse in which Bhagavan is just saying karma itself is insentient. It's God who decides what fruit the karma should give. So there's no automatically, if you do this karma, you'll get this fruit. It is not so. You do a karma, God decides what is the appropriate fruit for that act, karma. So this is a far more sophisticated understanding of the Vedantic understanding of karma. The Vedantic understanding of the law of karma is far deeper and more sophisticated and more correct than the Purva Mimamsa view of karma. The Purva Mimamsa view of karma is a very naive, a very childish view of karma. If I do this, I get what I want. It's not, life doesn't work like that. Karma doesn't work like that. Whatever actions we do, it will bear fruit, but the fruit is in the hands of God. And even the fruit gets stored in Sanchita. When we're in And whether we will ever experience the fruit of karma is entirely in God's hand. Some non-Vedantins, when they talk about karma, they say all the good karma and all the bad karma has to balance out, or that's one way people express it. Or sometimes they say you have to experience all the fruits of your past karmas. That will never happen. It's impossible, because we always as a general rule, we accumulate more fruit than we experience, than we can experience in each lifetime. So, and whatever actions we do in this lifetime will not bear fruit in this lifetime. It will go to Sanchita from where it may be selected in some other lifetime. So we can never exhaust Sanchita. According to Vedanta, how we free ourselves from karma is not by exhausting Sanchita, which would be impossible, but what is the root cause of karma? The root cause of karma is ego. Ego is the doer of karma and the experiencer of the fruit. As Bhagavan says in verse 38 of Uludunapadu, if we are the doer of actions, we will experience the resulting fruit. The doer of action means ego. And the ego is both the doer of action and the experiencer of the fruit. Why? How is ego the doer of action? Because as ego, we always identify ourselves as this body consisting of 5 sheaths. So the 3 instruments of action, body, mind, speech, and body, these instruments we experience as ourselves. So whatever actions are done by mind, speech, or body, we experience it as I am doing this. And therefore, we are the doer of actions, and consequently, we have to experience the resulting fruit. So as what Bhagavan says in verse 38 of Uludunapadu is, if we are the doer of action, we will experience the resulting fruit. Investigating who is the doer of action, when one knows oneself, doership will depart and all the 3 actions will slip off, all the 3 karmas will slip off. This is the state of liberation, which is eternal. What that means is all the 3 karmas exist only for ego. Ego is the doer of the agamya and the experiencer of the fruit, which is the sanchitra and prarabdha. Of course, sanchita we don't experience until it's allotted as prarabdha, but we experience the fruit of our past actions as prarabdha. So we are both the doer and the experiencer. If we investigate ourselves, who is this doer of action? In other words, who am I? We will thereby know what we actually are. When we know what we actually are, we will know that we are not this body consisting of 5 sheaths, which are the instruments by which we do action. We are just pure being. When we know ourselves as pure being, we will cease to be the doer. So the doership and experiencership will depart, and hence all the 3 karmas will come to an end. So it's all dependent on ego. That is, I've so far talked about the first verse. Now, coming to the second verse, Kriti Mahodado Patanakaranam Palamasaswatam Gati Nirodakam. This is basically 3 sentences, but it's expressed in a very compact way. The first line is 1 sentence. Kriti Mahodado Patanakaranam. This sentence is a sentence just with a subject. What is this referring to? We have to understand by referring back to the Tamil. That is, the first line means Kriti Mahodado means in the great ocean of action. Patana means falling. Karanam means cause. So the first sentence is simply the cause of falling in the great ocean of action. What is the cause of falling in the great ocean of action is not specified here, because as I say, Bhagavan wrote this Sanskrit version in a shorter meter, it wasn't possible for him to include everything. So we have to understand what he's referring to here. Fortunately, we don't have to, we are not left in any doubt, because we simply refer to the Tamil version. In the Tamil version, what Bhagavan says is, he begins the Tamil version, the order of sentences is different in Tamil. The first clause in Tamil is Vinayin Vilevu Vilebutru. That means the fruit of action perishing. What that implies is the fruit of action is impermanent, because if we once we experience the fruit of any action, that fruit is finished. We can't experience the same fruit again. That is, we can understand this with physical fruit. If someone gives you a mango, you can't eat it today and keep it and eat it again tomorrow. Once you've eaten it, it's finished. If you have just one mango, if you eat it, you have no mango. So likewise with the fruit of action. When we experience the fruit of action, it comes to an end. But then the most important word in the Tamil version is the next word, vittai. Vittai means as seed. That is, it is the seed. The seeds are what causes us to fall in the ocean of action. Vittai, vinay kadal virtidam. It is the seeds that cause us to fall in the ocean of action. What are those seeds? The seeds are vasanas. In fact, in the Malayalam version, Bhagavan says, vasanakara vittai. That means as seeds in the form of vasanas. So vasanas means our inclination. The inclination that causes us to fall in the ocean of action are Vishaya vasanas. Vishaya vasanas means our inclination to experience any Vishaya. Vishaya means anything other than ourselves. Because we have inclination to experience Vishayas, in order to experience the Vishayas, we need to do actions. So the Vishaya vasanas are expressed as a Vishaya vasana is also what is called a karma vasana, because the karma vasana is the expression of the Vishaya vasana. Why do we do any action? Because we want to experience some fruit. So it's the Vishaya vasanas that lead us to action. And those actions that we do under the sway of our Vishaya vasanas are what are called agamya. So, and agamya are the actions that bear fruit. So this is why it is as I said, the sanchita and prarabdha are just the fruit of actions. They are the effect. They are not the cause. The cause of that fruit, what gave rise, what yielded the fruit, is what gave rise to a fruit, is the agamya. And what causes us to do agamya? It is the Vishaya vasanas. When we allow ourselves to be swayed by Vishaya vasanas, our attention moves away from ourselves towards other things. That is mental activity. That all mental activity is a movement of our attention away from ourselves towards other things. And mental activity gives rise to activity of the speech and body. So all karma, all agamya is by definition those actions that we do under the sway of our vasanas. So vasanas are what cause us to fall in the great ocean of action. So though Bhagavan doesn't specify that here, this is what we need to understand. In some translations, I've seen it put, but action is the cause of falling in the ocean of action. That is like saying, I mean, there must be, the ocean of action is the problem. What is the cause for our falling in the ocean of action? We can't just say action is the cause. There must be a deeper cause. In some translations, it put the fruit is the cause of our falling. But the fruit, as Bhagavan says in the next sentence, palamasa swatam, the fruit is impermanent. So karma goes on perpetually until we deal with the root of it. So the fruit is impermanent. So the fruit can't be the cause. The fruit is the effect. So it is neither the karma nor the fruit that causes us to fall in the ocean of action. It is the seeds that make us do under whose sway we do agamya. That is what causes us to fall in the ocean of action. And those vasanas are whose vasanas? They are ego's vasanas. So ultimately, the ultimate cause is ego. But when we rise as ego, the very nature of ego is to have Vishaya vasanas. Because as Bhagavan says in verse 25 of Uludunapadu, he describes ego there as a Uruvatrapaya Hande, a formless phantom ego. And he explains the nature of this formless phantom. Urupatri Undam, grasping form, it comes into existence. Urupatri Nikum, grasping form, it stands. Urupatri Undu Mika Ongum, grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes abundantly. Uruvittu Urupatram, leaving form, it grasps form. So from these 4 sentences, what are we to understand about the nature of ego? The nature of ego is to be always grasping form. Without grasping form, ego cannot come into existence, stand, or flourish. What does he mean by grasping form? Since ego itself is a formless phantom, whatever forms it grasps are things other than itself. In other words, Vishayas. What he refers to there as form is Vishaya of any type of Vishaya is a form. So Vishayas means objects or phenomena. Anything other than ourselves is a Vishaya. So because it's the nature of ego to grasp Vishayas, in other words, they'll constantly be attending to and seeking to experience Vishayas, ego has, it's the very nature of ego to have Vishaya vasanas. Vishaya vasanas means the inclination to attend to those Vishayas, to attend to and experience those Vishayas. So it's the having Vishaya vasanas is the nature of ego. Ego is not the Vishaya vasanas, but it's the nature of ego to have Vishaya vasanas. So the root cause of our falling in the ocean of action, as soon as we rise as ego, the nature of ego is to have Vishaya vasanas, and therefore we do agamya and we fall in the great ocean of action. That is why Bhagavan indicates in verse 38 of Uludunapadu, as I said earlier, but the means to free ourselves from action, the only means is to put an end to the doer, the ego. And we can put an end to ego only by investigating ourselves. Ego is nothing but a false awareness of ourself, an awareness of ourself as I am this body. This body means the body consisting of 5 sheaths. So ego is the adjunct mixed awareness, I am. When we investigate ourselves, we are investigating the essential I am portion of ego. In other words, our own being. What is real in ego is only I am. The adjuncts, this body, are unreal. So in order to investigate what ego actually is, we need to hold on to the reality of ego. The reality of ego is I am. When we hold on to I am, the adjuncts drop off and I am alone remains. This is why in the next sentence, in the 5th sentence in this verse 25 of Uludunapadu, Bhagavan says, Tedinal otum pidicum. That means if sought, it takes flight. What he means by if sought, if ego, instead of grasping things other than itself, instead of grasping form, if it tries to grasp itself, if it turns its attention away from other things back towards itself, it will take flight. Take flight is a poetic way of saying it will subside and dissolve back into its source, because ego rises, stands, and flourishes by holding things other than itself, by grasping form. If it tries to grasp itself, it thereby lets go of all forms and it subsides and dissolves back into its source. So this is the means for liberation. So this is how we get rid of karma. But anyway, coming back to this verse 2, as I say, in the first line, he says, Kriti Mahodado Patana Karanam, the cause of falling in the great ocean of action. The implication is, but the vasanas are the cause of falling in the great ocean of action, as he says explicitly in Tamil. The fruit are impermanent. So we shouldn't be concerned about fruit. If we experience the fruit, it's finished. And moreover, once we've done the action, the fruit is no longer in our hands. It's entirely in the hands of God. So we let God take care of the fruit. Let us not be concerned about the fruit. What we need to be concerned about is the seeds that cause us to do the action but bear the fruit. The seeds of the vasanas, we need to avoid being swayed by our Vishaya vasanas. So long as we allow ourselves to be swayed by the Vishaya vasanas, we are drowning more and more in this great ocean of action. So in the last sentence of this verse, Bhagavan says, Gati Nirodhakam. Gati Nirodhakam literally means liberation obstructing. What that implies is doing action of any sort is not a means to liberation. It obstructs liberation. In Tamil, he says, Vidu tarile, it does not give liberation. But in Sanskrit, he says even more forcibly, it obstructs liberation. That is, so long as we are doing karma, we are going in the wrong direction. We are allowing ourselves to be swayed by our Vishaya vasanas that take our attention away from ourselves. In order to attain liberation, we need to stop being swayed by the Vishaya vasanas. We can avoid being swayed by Vishaya vasanas only by holding on to ourselves, only by holding on to I am, which is not a Vishaya. I am is our own reality, our own existence. So when we hold on to our own existence, we cease doing and we remain just as being. Being is the means to liberation, as Bhagavan makes clear in later verses. Then, so these first two verses, Bhagavan is pointing out liberation. The fruit of karma is entirely in God's hands. And liberation cannot be the fruit of a karma because karmas are finite, so they cannot give liberation. If you allow yourself to engage in action under the sway of your Vishaya vasanas, you'll be just drowning more and more and more in the great ocean of action. And you'll be experiencing the fruit. The fruit are impermanent, but though the fruit are impermanent, so long as you continue doing the agamya under the sway of vasanas, you're accumulating more and more fruit. There's no end to it. To put an end to it, we need to stop rising as ego. We can stop rising as ego only by investigating ourselves. While I notice that while I explain these verses, I'm referring to so many other teachings of Bhagavan, what Bhagavan says in Uludunapdu and elsewhere. The reason for this is we need to have a coherent understanding of Bhagavan's teachings. To understand any verse of Bhagavan, we need to understand it in the context of so many other verses because they all hold together as a coherent whole. So the meaning of the verses, the implication of the verses, of any of his verses, becomes much clearer when we consider it in the light of other verses, because each verse throws more light on each other verse. So this is why studying Bhagavan's original writings is so important. Even if we can't understand the original language, having a good translation and thinking deeply about it and understanding each verse in the context of all the other verses, then we get a clear and coherent and complete understanding of his teachings, which is very important because merely by understanding all these things, we're not going to attain liberation. But the more clearly we understand what Bhagavan has taught us, the clearer the practice will become to us. That is why Bhagavan taught all these things, was to impress upon us the need for the practice. And what is the practice? The practice is not doing anything, because doing is karma. The practice is not doing anything, it's just being. Attending to anything other than ourself is a doing. Attending to ourself is a cessation of doing. It is a being. So the last verse I'm going to talk about today is verse 3. How I plan to proceed with these early verses. Today I'm going to be talking about verses 1 to 3. Next time I'll talk about 3 to 8. The reason I talk about 3 both today and next time is that 3 is the first of a series of verses. It's also a connection between that series and the previous 2 verses. So the previous 2 verses are incomplete without this verse. And this verse then leads on to the next sequence of verses. So doing 1 to 3, and then 3 to 8, and then 8 to 10 is an appropriate way to divide up the first 10 verses, because the 3 is a link between verses 1 and 2 and verses 4 to 8, And 8 is a suitable link between the previous verses and 9 and 10. So that's why I will divide them up in this way. What Bhagavan says in verse 3 is, Ishwara pitum nechaya kritum chitta sodakam mukti sadakam. This is all one sentence, but it's put very, very briefly. Sadhuam often used to say Bhagavan's verses in Tamil or Sanskrit, that he said in many places, it's like telegram English. In the old days when people, before we had emails and texts and all these things, if you wanted to send an urgent message, you would send a telegram. But because you had to pay for each word or each letter in the telegram, it would be, telegrams would be written in a very compact way. So this is like telegram English. Bhagavan's Sanskrit or Tamil verses are like that. So, but we have to expand it to understand the meaning. So literally, what this means is Ishwara Pitum means offered to God. Nechaya Kritum, that means is na ichaya kritum, not done with desire. Chitta sodakum means mind purifier. Mukti sadhakum means liberation accomplishing. So the whole verse is, if we translate it literally, offered to God, not done with desire, mind purifier, liberation accomplishing. So what this implies is action that is not done with desire, but offered to God. That, in other words, normally when we do action, we do it wanting some result, wanting some fruit. If we go to the office every day to work, why do we go to the office every day? Because we want our salary at the end of the month. And why do we want our salary? Because we want to take care of our family and so on. So we do action with a desire for a certain fruit normally. So what Bhagavan is talking, in the previous verse, he says action obstructs liberation. So can action play any role in enabling us to attain liberation? This is what Bhagavan is explaining here. If we do action, instead of our action being motivated by desire for any fruit, if we do action offering the fruit to God, in other words, we're not doing the action for deriving any benefit for ourselves, we are doing it only for God. We're offering the fruit of the action we offer to God. In Tamil, what he says is, kartanu kakam nishkarmiya karma. That means nishkarmiya karma that is done for God. And in the Malayalam version, he's even more explicit. He says, Ishwara Pritiyanai. That means done for, that means for the love of God. So when you do an action for God, that means you're doing it for the love of God. So, but nishkarmiya karma, it is possible to do nishkarmiya karma only to the extent to which we have love for God. Because normally any action is motivated by a desire. In order for action to be not motivated by desire, we have to do it purely for the love of God. It's only for God's sake that we do whatever actions are given to us. So if it's our prarabdha to say be married, we are married, we have a family, we've got certain responsibilities to take care of our family. So we discharge our duties as a family person, not for what we gain from it, but just for the love of God. Then it is nishkarmiya karma. Or supposing it's our destiny to be a sannyasi. Sannyasis also do actions of some sort or other, even if it's sitting in a cave meditating, that's still an action. That action should not be for attaining any personal benefit. It should be done just for the love of God. So whatever action we do, we shouldn't do it with an eye on the fruit. We shouldn't be concerned about the fruit of the action. The fruit of the action is God's hand. We do the action just for the love of God. That is nishkarmiya karma. So one important thing to understand from this verse is, often it is said, there are 4 different paths, karma marga, bhakti marga, yoga marga and jnana marga. Or another way of expressing this is karma yoga, bhakti yoga, raja yoga, and jnana yoga. Bhagavan doesn't take karma marga to be separate from bhakti marga. As we will become clear when we go through further verses, Bhagavan takes the preliminary practices of bhakti are nishkarmiya karma. That is, whatever puja, japa, and dhyana we do, we must, if we do it without desire for the fruit, but just for the love of God, that is nishkarmiya karma. And Bhagavan often used to say, only an atmajnani can be a good karma yogi. That is, whatever karma yoga we do, it's inevitably there'll be, because as the ego, we always have some likes and dislikes. We cannot do nishkarmiya karma perfectly. To the extent to which we have love for God, we can do nishkarmiya karma. We can do actions just for the love of God. But the nishkarmiya karma will become perfect only when ego is eradicated. That's why Bhagavan often used to say, only the jnani can be a perfect karma yogi. So karma yoga isn't about doing. It's about not having desire for the fruit. It's about doing whatever is done, whether we do action or we don't do action. It's only for the love of God. The love of God is the key to nishkarmiya karma. So long as, until the ego is eradicated, and then whatever action is done is automatically nishkarmiya, because who has all the desire? It's only ego. So action without desire is possible only to the extent that we have love for God. So karma, nishkarmiya karma is not a separate path. It's the beginning, it's the early stages of the path of bhakti. And so this action that is done without this, or that is not done with desire, but offered to, but for the love of God, the fruit offered to God, you're doing it only for God, not for whatever fruit you can get from it. That is chitta sodakam. It is it's a mind purifier. It purifies the mind. In other words, it will purify the mind. Mukti sadakam. It is a liberation accomplishing. What that implies is it will thereby indirectly enable us to accomplish liberation. It's not a direct means, because as Bhagavan said in the previous verse, karma cannot give liberation. In Tamil, how he expresses this, he says, Gati vari kambikam. It shows the way to liberation. That is, so long as our mind is impure, we think only in terms of action. When we are faced with any problem in life, oh, what can I do to solve this problem? So we are always looking for means to do something in order to achieve something. Liberation cannot be achieved by doing anything. But in order to understand that liberation can be achieved not by doing anything, but by just being, we need a certain degree of purity of mind. So the nishkarmiya karma will purify the mind and thereby give us the inner clarity to understand what is the means to liberation. That's why in Tamil, Bhagavan says it shows the way to liberation. And how does it purify the mind? It purifies the mind because what are the impurities in the mind? The impurities in the mind are the Vishaya vasanas. The Vishaya vasanas are what prompt us to do action in order to experience fruit. If we do action not for the sake of any fruit, but just for the love of God, we are not being swayed by our Vishaya vasanas. We're being swayed only by our love of God. So because our focus is on God, whatever we do just for the love of God. So it's with the thought of God, but we do whatever we do. It's for his sake that we do it. So our mind is being directed towards God and not towards whatever we can get from the action. So we are thereby weakening the Vishaya vasanas and strengthening the love for God. But even that is imperfect, so long as we take God to be something other than ourselves. But Bhagavan is taking us through a step-by-step process here. He's clarifying this. So there's a lot more to be explained in later as we go on, and I'll be often referring back to this verse 3, because this verse 3 is that the context of all of verses 4, 5, 6, and 7 is clear only from the perspective of 3. And even the significance of verse 8 becomes clear, where in verse 8 he says, what is best of all? We had to refer back to 3 to understand what he means by best of all. So this verse 3 is a pivotal verse here. So as I say, I'll talk about it next time in more detail. Before I finish, there was one other thing I was asked to, before someone suggested that I talk about Upadesa Saram for the next, well, for a series of meetings, someone had asked a question. That is, Harish Subramaniam had asked 2 questions, actually. So I will try and answer those questions now. Sorry, I haven't left much time for it, but I will do my best. The first question Harish asked is, how do we know if we are doing the practice correctly? Here, I believe he's referring to the practice of self-investigation. Bhagavan called this path the path of Atma Vichara, self-investigation, or Jnana Vichara, investigation of awareness. When you're investigating something, when you start on an investigation, the way forward may not be very clear. You start off with a few clues and you begin to investigate. As we go deeper in the investigation, the way forward becomes clearer and clearer. So because this isn't a, though we can describe this practice of self-investigation as meditation. Sometimes Bhagavan refers to it as Swarupa Dhyana, meditation on our real nature, or Ananya Bhava, meditation on what is not other. We are meditating only on ourselves. But this meditating on ourselves is an investigation. We are attending to ourselves in order to see what we actually are. So our aim is to know, who am I? So we are investigating ourselves. We are attending to ourselves with the intention to know, who am I? In order to follow this properly, we first need to understand that the preliminaries, before we can start practicing self-investigation properly, we first need to have a little bit of theoretical or a little bit of conceptual understanding. That is, self-investigation means attending to ourselves. But what is meant by ourself? What is this self we have to attend to? So first we need to understand. Now, what we take ourselves to be now is this bundle of 5 sheaths, this body, life, mind, intellect, and will. These 5 collectively we take to be ourself. I am this person, such and such a person. This person consists of what? Body, life, mind, intellect, and will. So this person is, so long as we take this person to be ourselves, if we ask to attend to ourselves, we'll be attending to this person, but this person is not what ourself is. This is why the Advaitic teachings generally begin with neti neti. We need to understand what we are not and why we are not that. So we need to understand, but we are not this body or life or mind or intellect or will. These are all objects. We are the subject. So we do drikdrisya viveka, at least conceptually. We distinguish ourselves from other things. So all these 5 sheaths are objects known by us. We are not an object, we are the subject. So we are that which knows all these. So we first need to have this conceptual understanding, but we are not anything that appears or disappears. We are the awareness to which all these things appear and disappear. So once we've understood that we are that fundamental awareness, which is what is sometimes referred to as witness. But witness in the sense of the perceiver is ego. But the reality of ego is the pure awareness I am, which is also metaphorically referred to as witness, though it doesn't actually know anything other than itself. In that deeper sense of the term witness, Bhagavan said witness, sakshi means sanadhi. Witness means just the presence, the mere presence of ourself. But in the sense of the witness as the perceiver, that is ego. So we first need to distinguish ourselves from the 5 sheaths. We need to understand, but what we are investigating is not any of these 5 sheaths. It's only the I that is aware of itself as I am these 5 sheaths. So what we are to investigate is only I. We investigate I only by attending to I. We can't investigate I in any other way. We have to investigate anything other than ourselves. We need the mind, we need the 5 senses, we need instruments to know things other than ourselves. But to know ourselves, we don't need any instrument, because we ourselves are Swayam Prakasa, we are self-shining. So we always know ourselves as I am. Even when ego doesn't rise, and ego rises and flourishes in waking and dream. In sleep, there is no ego, but we are still aware I am. So what we actually are is only that fundamental awareness I am. So we need to understand that. So what we are investigating is only this fundamental awareness I am. And how do we investigate it? Only by attending to it. So in order to know if we are doing the practice correctly, we need to understand we need to understand Bhagavan's teachings correctly. If we understand Bhagavan's teachings correctly, we will understand that we are not anything other than that fundamental awareness I am. That is when the first question Shiva Prakasham Pillai asked Bhagavan was, Nana, who am I? Bhagavan answered, Arivenan, awareness alone is I. And then he asked, what is the nature of that awareness? Bhagavan said, Satchidananda. So the awareness that we actually are is not the awareness that knows other things. It is the awareness that is just being. The awareness that is Sat and Ananda. That is it is not awareness of things. It is the awareness of just being. That is our awareness of our own being. In other words, the awareness I am. That is the awareness that we have to investigate. So we can investigate this awareness I am only by attending to it, only by being, and since we are self for that, it is being self-attentive. So if we understand correctly, if we got a correct conceptual understanding of Bhagavan's teachings, it'll be clear to us what the practice is. The practice is not attending to any object, but attending to that fundamental awareness in which all objects appear and disappear. That is the fundamental awareness of our own existence, I am. So if we understand the teachings correctly, we will understand the practice correctly, and it'll be clear to us that what is the correct practice? It is just being self-attentive. And how do we know that we are making progress? Very simple. If you're trying to attend to yourself, you're making progress. If you're not attending to yourself, you're not making progress. So we progress simply by attending to ourselves. Attending to ourselves is not a doing, it is just being. Because we know ourselves just by being ourselves. We don't have to do anything to know I am. Whether we're doing things or not doing things, we are always aware I am. So in order to be aware of just I am and not of anything else, we need to focus our entire attention on ourself alone. Attending to ourself is not a doing, it is just being. Attending to anything other than ourself is a being, it's a karma. That's where these verses come in, are so important. These early verses where Bhagavan says, we cannot attain this by doing anything. Karma will only obstruct liberation. Karma can begin to help us get out of this only if it is done without desire and for the love of God. So long as, how do we know whether we're making progress? So long as we're attending to I, so long as we're trying to be self-attentive, so long as whenever our attention goes outwards, we try to bring it back to ourselves. Well, whatever may appear, to whom does it appear? It appears to me. So we turn our attention back to ourselves. So long as we are trying to keep our attention fixed on ourselves, and whenever it goes away from ourselves, trying to bring it back, we are making progress. In practice, most of us are still our love for this is still very insufficient. So much of the time we are attending to other things instead of attending to ourselves. But at least as much as possible, we should try to attend to ourselves. Every moment that we attend to ourselves, we are making progress. So let us try and attend to ourselves more and more and more and more. This is the way to escape from all karma, to escape from this great ocean of karma. It is only by clinging to our being that we can get out of this ocean of doing. So this is, Bhagavan's path is so simple, so direct. Instead of being concerned about doing, now we are drowning in this great ocean of action. How to avoid being drowning in this great ocean of action? Hold on to our being. Our being is that fundamental awareness that is always shining within us as I am. Let us hold on to that awareness of our own being. That is the way to escape from the great ocean of action. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Arunachala Ramanaya.
Michael, thank you so much.
Sorry, I went a little bit over time, but I hope it was worth it.
Oh, it was absolutely worth it, Michael. There are a number of people still on YouTube watching your session. Michael, thank you so much. And on behalf of Ramana Kendra Delhi, a heartfelt gratitude for taking us through Upadesa Saram. And
it's all Bhagavan is taking us through it. It's not me, because he has put the railway track. We are just the train is just to run along the railway track, and he will lead it along even to what is the power that leads us along this railway track that he's laid out for us. He is the power. So let us just surrender ourselves to him. He will make all these things clear to us.
Very well said, Michael. Just as a quick point, next time, Michael, we will be taking up verses 4 to 8, or would it be?
No, 3 to 8. I'm going to repeat 3 because it's an important link between these first 2 verses and the next sequence of verses.
Very well. And we might like to take on a few more questions, because I'm assuming between now and February, there would be a few questions that I would receive.
Okay.
So
I will see if I can fit them in, but I think let's give priority to this, these verses.
Absolutely.
And I will, if there's time, or if necessary, if you don't mind me extending the time a little further, I don't know what is convenient for you, but if there are more questions, I don't want to, I want to do justice to the verses.
Absolutely. I would expect more questions to be around the teachings of these verses
very
only.
Good, very good,
so,
very good. That's how it should be. That's how it should
be. If we have to extend by 10-15 minutes to take the devotees along, that should be perfectly okay.
Okay, right.
Michael, once again, a very, very warm thank you. And
just to Bhagavan.
Thank you. Just a quick administrative request and announcement on behalf of the Direct Path team, the quarterly journal of Ramana Kendra Delhi. Direct Path is looking for volunteers to write a 50-word summary of the satsangs for each issue. In case you may wish to participate and support Direct Path, you could reach out to Advait, who's our editor, or you can just WhatsApp me or send me a short email at secretary@ramankendradelhi.org. My number is also, I think, available with all of you. So I'll be very grateful if we have some nominations, and we've already received a few nominations over the weekend. So thank you for that. Thank you, Michael. And now I would request Rajesh ji at the Kendra Shrine to initiate the puja, and then we wrap up.
जय गणेश जय गणेश देवा माता की पार्वती पिता
Namo Ramana. That brings us to the closure of today's satsang. Just a quick announcement. We still have a handful of desk calendars, wall calendars, and diaries at Ramana Kendra, Delhi. Should you be interested in those, please feel free to reach out directly to the Kendra office, and you can have them picked up. The shrine is still closed, but a few of these administrative things we can always support. Namo Ramana, we shall